Have you ever thought that someone working as a teacher with an annual salary of just 28,000 dollars could become a millionaire by the age of 36? You might smile in disbelief or think maybe he won the lottery or inherited a fortune. But no, this story is entirely different. There's no magic, no secret benefactor, just an ordinary teacher living in a modest apartment in the suburbs, biking to work every day, eating plain pasta, and saving every penny. And somehow, through quiet discipline and consistent effort, he built over $1 million in wealth, not because he earned more, but because of how he used what he had. Today, I want to share that journey with you, not just to impress you, but to help you believe that you can do the same. Because what makes this story powerful is that it's not extraordinary at all. Every step is practical, simple, and something you can start doing, even if all you have is $100 in your account. And if you're still wondering, can I really start small and build real financial freedom? Stay with me until the end of this video. Because that teacher once had the exact same question, and one unexpected conversation in an old mechanic's workshop changed his life forever. At 19, he wasn't much different from any other college student, working part-time to scrape together tuition money, living off cheap sandwiches, and carrying a constant worry about the future. He worked at an old bus depot where the roar of engines filled the mornings and the smell of grease clung to every thread of his shirt. It wasn't a place where people talked about personal finance, investing, or financial freedom, but it was right there that he met someone, a man he would later call his wake-up mentor. Mike wasn't a financial advisor. He wasn't a millionaire in a sharp suit. He was a seasoned mechanic, tan skin, calloused hands, and a white t-shirt stained with oil. But there was something in Mike's eyes that made people want to stop and listen. And on what seemed like an ordinary day, Mike asked the young man a question. If I gave you $10,000, what would you do with it? The question made him pause. After a moment of hesitation, he answered honestly, I'd use it to continue my studies. Mike didn't respond right away. He just smiled gently and pointed toward the corner of the room where a vending machine stood. Every day you spend $3 on a muffin or a candy bar, right? $3 a day is nearly $100 a month. If you invested that money instead, one day you wouldn't need anyone to hand you $10,000. That was the first time he realized investing doesn't require a lot of money, but it does require an early start. Mike took him for a walk around the neighborhood where he lived, not a fancy area, but a row of simple, clean, peaceful homes. He pointed to each one and said, that one's mine. I rent out that one, and this is where I live. The mechanic had quietly built wealth over the years, simply by saving consistently and investing in what Daniel would later call simple index funds. It wasn't just a lesson about money. It was a lesson about vision, that you don't have to be the smartest or start with the most. You just have to start. From that day, he began putting away his first $100 each month, the same money that used to vanish into forgettable snacks. And that was the day he began his long-term investing journey. Simple, steady, and quietly powerful. If it weren't for Mike, he might have gone on believing that investing was for rich people, something distant, risky, or meant for some far-off future. But the truth is, the earlier you start, the closer freedom becomes. And that's exactly why you need to hear the next part. Because even without much money, he started, and that path led him to something no one ever expected. When Daniel started college, life didn't get any easier. He was still a broke student, buried in tuition debt, earning just enough from his library job to cover food and old textbooks. But here's what made him different. Even while in debt, he started investing. You might wonder, how do you invest when you're already in debt? But Daniel understood something few people in their 20s realize. Time is the most powerful asset in long-term investing. So he made a bold move. Instead of using his part-time income to pay tuition, he took out loans and invested what he earned in low-cost index funds, the kind he'd learned about from Mr. Mike. Each month, he put aside $100, sometimes $80, sometimes just $50, depending on how frugal he could live. Daniel didn't live like other students. While others ate out, he brought cold meals from home. When they shopped new clothes on sale, he wore the same hoodie from high school. Every spare dollar went straight into the market, and surprisingly, he didn't feel deprived. He felt free. Once, a roommate asked why he put himself through all that, especially with no guarantee for the future. Daniel just smiled and said, "Because I'm buying freedom for the future version of me." To him, every small investment was a vote for his financially free self 10, 20, even 30 years down the line. After graduation, Daniel carried about $12,000 in student debt, but with the discipline he'd built, he paid it off in just 9 months. No new car, no flashy phone, no takeout. He took a teaching job at a small coastal public school, lived in a modest rental, and kept investing every single month. From the outside, people saw a young teacher making just $28,000 a year and assumed he was just getting by. But the truth was, because he started investing before he even graduated, Daniel had already built a strong financial foundation. What set him apart wasn't a high salary, it was the habit of investing while earning low income. And here's the part most people don't realize. Those early years of small investments end up creating the majority of long-term wealth. Because compound interest doesn't reward who has the most, it rewards who starts the earliest. If you've ever thought you needed a bigger paycheck to start investing, think of Daniel, the young man who planted millionaire seeds while still borrowing to finish school. But there's one more chapter to this story that took his journey to another level. A lifestyle so extreme, most wouldn't dare try it. And that's where we're heading next. When Daniel started his first job as a middle school teacher, his salary was just $28,000 a year. For most people, that's barely enough to get by, certainly not enough to invest. But Daniel was different. He didn't just invest, he made investing the center of his life. And to do that, he lived a lifestyle many would call extreme. In his first year of teaching, Daniel didn't rent an apartment like other teachers. Instead, he house sat for families who were away for weeks at a time. He moved from place to place, sometimes a cabin in the woods, other times a home with 3 cats, just to avoid paying rent. Each morning, he walked miles to catch the bus, carrying a worn-out thermos filled with homemade coffee. By his second year, he rented a tiny room in a town nearly 55 kilometers from school. But he didn't buy a car. Rain or shine, Daniel biked to work every day. Some mornings, the snow blanketed the roads. Still, he layered up, pulled on a wool beanie, and pedaled through the forest to make it to class on time. As for showers, he used the staff bathroom at school. Meals, he followed a diet as simple as it gets: pasta, potatoes, discounted vegetables, and sometimes clams he picked from the beach on weekend walks. Daniel once shared how he went out with an old local man named Fred, carrying a plastic bucket to the shore and learning how to clean clams. That night he boiled them, added pasta, and had a protein-packed dinner, almost completely free. He didn't buy new clothes for 3 years, wore the same worn-out shirt, the same scuffed leather shoes, but always showed up to class looking neat and respectful. What's remarkable is that Daniel didn't feel deprived. He felt free. Every dollar he didn't spend was a step closer to financial independence. This wasn't extreme saving out of fear. It was intentional saving for freedom. He didn't want to rely on his teaching paycheck forever. He wanted the power to choose when to stop working, where to go, and how to live without worrying at the end of the month. That minimalist lifestyle, cutting every unnecessary cost, allowed him to invest consistently, month after month, even on a modest income. Each small contribution grew inside low-cost index funds, which he trusted after reading hundreds of personal finance books. But the real secret wasn't how much he saved. It was how he made investing part of his lifestyle. This way of living isn't for everyone, and Daniel wouldn't expect others to go to the extremes he did. But he knows one thing. Those years helped him buy freedom before turning 40, while his peers were still paying off cars and mortgages. And then, at age 36, something unbelievable happened. His net worth crossed the $1 million mark, without ever changing jobs or chasing a high salary. And that's what makes this story worth remembering, because behind every sacrifice was a future he had already seen, and that future is where we're going next. That autumn morning, soft golden light slipped through the window of a modest apartment in Vancouver, gently illuminating the worn wooden desk where Daniel sat. He was sipping his usual black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just that bold, earthy aroma that reminded him of cold winter mornings. On his laptop screen, one number stood out. Portfolio value, $1,004,271. He paused, eyes locked on the figure. Silence filled the room, broken only by the soft ticking of the clock and his quiet breath. 36 years old. Once a college student working part-time, biking over 30 miles a day just to save on gas. Once eating boiled clams with pasta because he couldn't afford meat. Once wearing the same shirt for years, not because he didn't like shopping, but because he knew every dollar saved was another step toward freedom. Daniel didn't win the lottery. He didn't launch a tech startup. He didn't inherit wealth. What he did have was a consistent long-term investment strategy, putting his money into low-cost index funds, tracking the market with patience, and letting time do the rest. He started by saving 10% of each paycheck, then increased it to 30%. He never chased hot stocks. Instead, he preached principles. Live below your means, invest consistently, and ignore the noise. By age 36, Daniel wasn't just a millionaire. He was financially free, no longer tied to a paycheck, no longer waking up to an alarm clock, but to the gentle light of sunrise through the curtains. He began writing, teaching personal finance to students and traveling the world with his wife, also a teacher. Bali, Rome, Kyoto, anywhere could be home for a few weeks. Each place carried its own scent. The spicy aroma of curry in India, the calming scent of cedarwood in Kyoto, the salty breeze of the Mediterranean at sunset. Sometimes, while sipping coffee at a small fay in Lisbon, he would quietly watch people walk by and smile. Not because he was richer than them, but because he deeply understood the value of the freedom he now lived. He had bought it, bit by bit, with every dollar he once saved. The real lesson isn't the $1 million. It's the slow and intentional journey. Daniel is living proof that with a smart investing plan for low-income earners, a modest lifestyle, and unwavering discipline, financial freedom is not a fantasy. But how did he know he was on the right path? How did he stay committed for so many years while the market swayed and temptations loomed? Daniel captured it all in 9 simple rules, shared in his best-selling book, Millionaire Teacher. And these rules have helped thousands around the world begin their own investing journey. We'll dive into them in the next part. When Daniel walked into a small classroom in Chiang Mai to speak with young students about finance, the room seemed to slow down. The soft morning sunlight filtered gently through the dusty glass windows, the ceiling fan rotated quietly above, and the faint scent of old books lingered in the air. He wasn't wearing a suit, didn't bring a laptop or a slideshow, just a thin book in his hand. Millionaire Teacher. And on each page were the 9 simple rules that changed his life. The first rule Daniel shared in a warm, steady voice: pay yourself first. It sounds simple, but for many, it's the hardest step. Before spending a dollar, he would invest at least 10 to 20% of his income toward his future. He recalled how, back when he was a teacher in Canada, he had 30% of every paycheck automatically transferred into an investment account, as if that money never existed. The second rule: start as early as you can. He smiled as he talked about his old alarm clock and the very first $100 he put into an index fund, instead of buying the latest phone. Time, he said softly, is your greatest ally in investing. Then came rule number 3: don't chase promised returns. He admitted he was once tempted by flashy emails offering guaranteed high-yield funds, but after reading hundreds of personal finance books, Daniel knew the simpler the better. He chose low-cost index funds, no promises, but history showed they outperform most actively managed funds. Rule 4: don't let someone else control your money. He told the story of nearly buying into a complex investment insurance plan pitched by a well-dressed advisor. If you don't understand it, he said, don't put your money into it. The room went quiet. You could hear pages turning. Everyone was reflecting. The following rules unfolded naturally, paired with real-life images: rebalancing your portfolio like a yearly health check, avoiding market timing because no one can predict the future, and simplifying everything because investing shouldn't feel like gambling. It should feel calm, steady, and long-term. Each rule came with a tiny life moment: skipping a daily Starbucks run, deciding not to buy a new car, choosing a quiet evening reading a finance book instead of scrolling social media. Little habits, but they built $1 million foundation. At the end, Daniel didn't say, "You must follow me." He simply smiled, closed his book, and left a question. If an ordinary school teacher could do this, what's stopping you? The sunlight now poured through the window. Dust particles floated gently, sparkling like tiny reminders of hope. A student raised her hand and asked softly, "So, if I'm starting from zero, what's the very first thing I should do?" Daniel looked at her, smiled again, and replied, "That's exactly what we're going to talk about next." One autumn afternoon, as leaves drifted gently past the window, Daniel sat at his small kitchen table. A warm amber light from the hanging lamp reflected off the steaming cup of tea in front of him. The faint scent of mint mingled with the soft whisper of wind through the door crack, creating a quiet space, perfect for reflection. Nearly 20 years had passed since he began his investment journey from zero. Now, money was no longer a worry. But if you asked him, "What's the single most important lesson for beginners?" Daniel wouldn't hesitate. It would be this: start small, but do it consistently. He remembered the first time he set aside $100 a month to invest. Back then, his teacher's salary barely covered living expenses. Sometimes it didn't. But he did one simple thing. He automated that transfer every payday. "When you don't see the money in your wallet, you don't spend it," he'd say with a smile. That small investment was the seed for everything that came after. Over time, he increased the amount, but it was that consistent habit that truly made the difference. And it's something anyone living on an average income can do. You don't need $1,000. You don't need a big amount to start. You just need consistency. Daniel often uses this example when speaking to college students. If you invest $100 a month, starting at age 25, and stick with it for 40 years, assuming a 7% average return, you'll have nearly $250,000 by retirement. Double it to $200 a month, and that number jumps to almost $500,000. Not because you're smarter, just because you gave time the chance to work. Another lesson he emphasizes is this: stop comparing your lifestyle to others. In the age of social media and flashy consumer culture, it's easy to spend money just to look like you're doing well. But the truth is, many who look rich are drowning in debt. Meanwhile, those who are quietly building wealth often live modestly and invest wisely. Living below your means, rather than spending to your limit, is what helped Daniel inch toward financial freedom. Investing in low-cost index funds, like those from Vanguard or Fidelity, is also one of the smartest moves for beginners. You don't need to pick stocks. You don't need to beat the market. Just pick a diversified fund and let time do the work. Daniel calls it the busy person strategy, because once it's set, you rarely have to touch it. And perhaps the most underrated reward of all is the peace of mind you gain when you know you're on the right path. No more stress about paychecks. No panic when the car breaks down or medical bills come in. Financial peace, a feeling you can't measure with numbers, is the deepest reward. By now, the sky outside had darkened. Daniel stood to refill his tea, the golden light still glowing softly above. He smiled gently. "If I could do this on a teacher's salary, you can do it too, in your own way." And if you're still wondering where to begin, the final part of this video is just for you. On a cobblestone street in southern Italy, where the golden afternoon sun kisses the old plastered walls, Daniel and his wife walk hand in hand. The scent of ripe oranges lingers in the breeze, shoes echo softly on the stones, and the murmur of a nearby cafe hums like a gentle background song, the soundtrack to a life lived by choice. No more 6 a.m. alarms. No more anxiety when the bills arrive. No more working until 65. Financial freedom, for them, isn't just a number. It's a feeling of lightness. It's the power to choose how to live, where to be, and when to give time to what truly matters. But don't think Daniel had something special. He didn't win the lottery, didn't inherit wealth, didn't build a tech company. He was just a teacher, starting with $100 a month. It all began with a vending machine and a quiet conversation with an old mechanic. He didn't have to be smarter than anyone, just more patient, more disciplined, a little more consistent every single day. If you're still watching, maybe you're asking yourself the same question: could I do this too? The answer is yes. You don't need to live as extremely as Daniel, but you can start small, and you can start today, because you can't go back and begin earlier, but you can begin earlier than tomorrow. And if this story inspired you, the next video will take it even further. I didn't start investing until my late 30s, and it cost me $300,000. It's a different journey, a later start, but just as real and just as human. I'll see you there.